Merry Meet. Have you ever felt a strong desire to make a difference in our world? Well, today's guest answered that call and will share his journey, the impact of the work, and the insights that we might take away from understanding cultures deeply. Hi, I am Dr. Kathryn Bingham, founder of LeadUP, a veteran and woman-owned small business that serves the needs of executives, entrepreneurs, and professionals to elevate their leadership, reinvent, redesign, or pivot, change their life, change their work, and change their world. And I'm also the author of Driving Pink. So today we have Dr. Nathaniel Dunigan, founder of, do you say Ali or do you say ALI?
Well, both.
Okay.
But we tend to say ALI because
Okay.
Ali sounds like a person's name.
Yes, I would think so. So ALI, AidChild Leadership Institute, was formerly known as AidChild and Nathaniel happens also to be a colleague from University of San Diego's Leadership Doctoral Program. Nathaniel's book, Are Not Mahogany, shares insight from his dissertation study. So Nathaniel, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So I started with the question on whether our viewers or listeners ever felt a strong desire to make a difference in our world. So tell us, Nathaniel, a bit about the journey that led to your work in Uganda.
Okay. I love that question because I feel like it's a blessing when someone does feel that moment that you're describing. It's associated with purpose. It's associated with life meaning. It's associated with life misery. I mean, there's so many nuances that come to a person when they are able to encounter a moment like that, and then also be able to address it and respond to it. So I feel really blessed that I've been able to do that. And Kathryn, you don't know him personally, but from social media and from all our conversations, one of my kids, Dickens, who is a chef. And I see that in him too, in a very different way, but he found cooking, he found culinary arts, and that inspires him deep down into his soul. And I see it as he dances in the kitchen every day. So that connection between what we know, what we experience, and a notion of purpose and joy is just a real blessing. Sometimes it feels like a curse, but most of the time it's a blessing. So that happened to me when I first visited the continent in 1998. Makes me feel so old to say that, 24 years ago, when I came just as a volunteer HIV prevention educator. I thought I would be here for a month and do some HIV prevention education, go on a safari, and then, get back to the quote, real world, end quote. But on that trip is when I met young people, specifically children, who really changed my life. The HIV/AIDS situation in the world was very different 24 years ago than it is now, and certainly was very different here in Uganda. So I met babies and children who were not living with HIV, but who were dying, and there were no resources available for them. But that's when I had that moment that connected with purpose and meaning. And I knew that I could do something. I didn't know what, but I knew that I could do something, wanted to do something, and would do something. And so that's when I put together a feasibility study and put together a committee and talked to a lot of people. And it took 2 years of careful consideration, especially with the local community and with partners in the field, to come up with a plan, which evolved into hospice care, which then evolved into life-saving care, which has then evolved into this Leadership Institute.
Awesome. Awesome. Tell us a bit about AidChild or ALI's mission, and what are some of the ways that you are providing support literally from the time you have children who come who are infants all the way through as they reach adulthood. The mentoring portion goes throughout, as well as other aspects of their life and experience. So tell us what's happening.
Well, our mission now, our goal now is to foster a generation to create a leadership model that will result in an HIV-free generation. And it always gives me great thrills to say that, because there's so much hope in that compared to where we started, which was end of life care. And so the notion that we have traveled so far means also, I think, that the organization is in a healthy place, able to respond to successes and failures. One of my favorite quotes is from Maya Angelou, who says, "Do the best you can until you know better, then do better." And we haven't always done that, but I'm really proud of our team because I think they have really focused on that idea. And I think that's really important as entrepreneurs, as people who are doing something that hasn't been done before, or hasn't been done very often, to make new mistakes. That's my prayer every day. God, help me make new mistakes. Not to make no mistakes, but a new mistake. I don't want the same mistake I made yesterday to be the one I made today, or make again today. And that's true for us as an organization as well. So our mission has evolved over these 22, 24 years from end of life care, offering sanctity and honor to lives, then to life-saving care, and now to this much bigger goal of an HIV-free generation. Now, we don't think our little organization will accomplish that on its own, but we do believe that because of our kids have been with us since they were babies, as you mentioned, have a duty, a responsibility, and an opportunity to life experience, their own learnings, and translate it into a brand new way of thinking about where we go from here and how it can be better and different than where we came from.
One of the things that you do support is education. And I want to point out for listeners and viewers, in the United States, we have public K through 12 education, and there are unique struggles for children in poverty. But one thing our families here don't contend with per se is this concept of school fees and the critical nature of the performance testing that then gives access to either you do get to go to the next level, or what are the opportunities at the next level. Can you describe the system and how this impacts opportunity in Uganda?
Yeah, well, that's a very important question and a very important thing to understand. There are many nuances to it. One is not just as you have described, with regard to school fees, but even once you get the school fees, there are nuances of stress and pressure that are placed upon students. The biggest one, in my experience and in my opinion, is that they have to pass the PLE, the primary leading exam. That's after P7, primary 7. So this is a huge standardized test that they must take across the country, and their results on this test at 7th grade, basically, inform so much of their future. But if they do not get certain grades or marks, as we call them here, on that P7 PLE exam, then they cannot get into certain secondary schools. And then if they cannot get into those certain secondary schools, their chances of getting into certain universities are very different, or limited or eliminated. And then even in secondary school, their grades determine what they are allowed and not allowed to study at university. It's not a matter of choice. That you graduate at age 18 or 19 and say, I think I'd like to study architecture. Well, no, that's not an option if your grades do not match or do not fit into the mold that has been imposed upon you and your opportunities. So it's just a very difficult struggle, and especially for people who don't feel empowered, who do not have power, do not have access to tools, relationships, and opportunities that could free them from that force of government. I don't want to say control, that sounds different than what I want to mean, but of the government system. You're trapped. And so back to your first question and sort of your point of these interviews is, how can you ever find purpose? How can you ever find those aha moments if you're just trapped in it according to this system that judges you based only on standardized tests?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the school fees part is a different one. But yeah, you have to pay for school. Even government schools that are supposedly free have different requirements, things like uniforms, books, if it's boarding school, basins and soaps and things. So officially they're free, but there are a lot of other financial requirements in order for you to actually show up on the first day of school and be enrolled.
One of the things that I think about when I think about AidChild or ALI is that I appreciate that, having served as a director of a nonprofit in the past, I know the importance of building in sustainability, right? And you've taken a very creative approach for generating funding for the work of AidChild. So share some of the businesses you started and how these contribute back to the mission of the organization.
Well, I grew up on the Navajo reservation in the southwestern United States. And I saw so many excellent organizations get started by impressive, driven visionaries. But then those organizations always failed when something happened to that visionary, or when something happened to the initial funding. And so I knew I didn't want to repeat that. And that's the make new mistakes category again. And so I was always looking for ways that we could earn our own money. But more important than that is that I did not want our students, our interns, and our children to grow up just with the understanding that they were recipients only. It's wonderful to be a recipient. I'm a recipient as well. But there's a nuance that's important when we also realize that we have power, we have our own opportunities, we have our own abilities, and we're not just victims waiting for someone to come help us. And so I thought all those pieces came together with the idea of sustainability. So first we started with fruits and vegetables, which I think is common. Then we progressed to chicken farming, which also is common. And even back then when we were quite small, we got 8,000 eggs a month, which was cool. But you know, how much can you sell an egg for? These days, by the way, they cost a lot more than they used to.
Yeah.
But it wasn't enough money. So then that's when we progressed to opening an art gallery and a cafe right at the equator line here in Uganda, which is still there now, almost 20 years later. And that has been a great source of income until the pandemic, when of course the world changed and tourism stopped. But it's still alive, and we're still working on it, and it's made a profit even throughout the pandemic. Kathryn, it's made a profit. Some months it was only like $100, but it stayed alive. Staff remained paid, artists remained paid, vendors remained paid. The organization didn't benefit, but everyone else remained paid through the pandemic, and I'm quite proud of that. And we're working on expanding that. We've had other businesses too. We've had restaurants that we've created and sold at a profit. We've tried a variety of businesses that have been successful, and that we sold off and moved on to other ideas. But our Equator Cafe and Gallery has been with us and continues to be with us as our most consistent source of income, again, until the pandemic. But we're hopeful about what's coming next.
And people can still donate. I mean, there are those traditional methods of giving, where if there's a particular need that gets posted, people can respond to that. But I think it's
the
there's
businesses
value.
don't even.
Yeah, there's value in these other experiences, because even some of your students are then able to participate. And I mean, I watched a great interview, and someone who'd been in your program is speaking out and sharing while the reporter was coming, I think it was to the Equator store, right? And then you hear them. And so there's a sense of pride in the in the work that's being done. There's a sense of participation in the work that's being done. And again, it is not like being a recipient. It is, they are a part of the work that also contributes back to the mission. So I feel like there's this full circle of benefit going on, and growth and strength and leadership that's being developed as they do that. You know, one of the things.
Let me, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead, go ahead.
I think there were a little delay here. Yeah, my board of directors would be very annoyed with me if I didn't make it very clear that we are not 100% self-sustained. Donations definitely are still very much needed, and now more than ever because of the pandemic.
Mhm.
But we are working towards more self-sustainability, but we're certainly not 100% self-sustained by any stretch. We've been up as much as 50% self-sustained. Now, post-pandemic, we're only about 2% self-sustained. But like I said, we know that's coming back. We're working on altering our models. We've been working aggressively at even changing our offerings at the cafe to match those sorts of customers we do have, since they're different than the customers that we had in 2019.
Mhm.
So we're trying to tend this business carefully and well, and be smart about how we proceed from here. But that certainly does not mean that we do not need donations. We absolutely
Right, and that's I plug that in there because I've been there as a nonprofit director, so I know that we need to let people know that there's a need. So if their heart is touched for that, they will respond to it. You know, going back to the activities, right, and that I appreciate about the work that you do, and any requests that you make to support the work, is your commitment to honor and respect both the individuals and the culture. And you've done this, let me go back to in the book, We Are Not Mahogany, as well as in stories and photographs of the children, the young men and women in ALI's programs. So tell us about this intentional choice about how we share the needs, but we honor the individuals and we portray them in ways that are supportive and respectful.
Well, thank you. I'm grateful that that comes through, and I appreciate you saying that. The notion of dignity, I think that's the word that I would write down on a whiteboard and underline. Dignity is just so often forgotten in today's world, isn't it? I mean, if it's social media, if it's politics, if it's government, if it, I don't any sector that you might come across, this notion of dignity seems to have been lost, forgotten, devalued. You know, I don't really know how to express that clearly, but dignity underlined is what we remind ourselves of all the time here, and are trying to be very respectful of. Temptation of many groups in the world to post a picture that is not offering dignity, or to post a story that is not offering dignity. And I'm sure over the years we've slipped and made a mistake here or there as well, but we definitely don't want to. We want to be very focused on individual dignity, individual success, individual value, not just the bottom line as an organization. So the short answer to your question is a respect of dignity. The longer answer has to do with, well, for example, many times when people come to visit us, they say, well, can we take a picture or can we take a video? And I say, yes, as long as the product is one that you would want shared of yourself. You know, if the photo that you take is a photo you would be happy to have taken of yourself, then take it, right?
Right.
But if don't share a picture that you wouldn't want shared of yourself. And that question seems to add a lot of clarity to people who are otherwise sensitive, otherwise caring, otherwise, well-intentioned. But when you phrase it that way, then suddenly that notion of dignity isn't so elusive or so nuanced or so confusing and becomes quite clear. And so that's what we really focus on. Why? Well, first of all, I mean, it seems so basic to me, but more importantly to that, it comes down to the same question of we were trying to raise change makers, leaders. We're trying to empower people. We're trying to empower ourselves as a team. And how can any of that be achieved without dignity?
I agree. I agree. And there's such a contrast, because I think, and I can't speak for how similar nonprofits raise money in other countries, but you will see in the United States, the Hungry Child Inn, fill in the blank, third world population. They are emaciated. There might be flies flickering around. They may be unclothed in and not modestly draped at all. And I think the intent is to, stab the knife in and twist around a little and create that, oh my goodness, how sad this is. We should respond to that. But at the same time, I think
Right.
we have to be more careful about, what are we saying when we say that's the need? We will only respond if we see it that way. And so I don't have the answers to that, but I do know there's a marked contrast. And I'm going to come back to that in just a second. We face increasing polarity in the United States, right? And one of the ways that I feel we create discourse is understanding and learning and appreciating, not just learning about, but appreciating the nature of other people's and cultures' lived experience. So I want to come right now back to We Are Not Mahogany, because I think this is one of those, and I'm going to turn it, thin and meaty books. Like, it's a fast read for those of you who haven't heard of this or are hearing for the first time. And it's a deep topic, but treated in a way that people can take it in a fairly quick way. It makes it a good choice for, say, book clubs or mission or faith-based groups to read. And there are some great discussion prompts at the end. So, Nathaniel, what will people find in We Are Not Mahogany?
Well, yes, I'm glad you turned it sideways like that, because I usually refer to it as a booklet instead of a book. I mean, it really is very, very short. And that was very intentional. I mean, it's my whole dissertation boiled down into a more accessible way. If you want to read the dissertation, you can, but you've written yours, I've written mine. They're boring enough to write, let alone
We
read.
all do it with,
But,
and your eyes glaze over, right? With our requirements to,
so
yeah.
And then I wanted it accessible to everybody in the field. I didn't want it to be expensive to buy. I didn't want it to be hard to read through. I mean, one person even told me you can read it over a cup of coffee. I mean, it's really, it is a little bit more than a pamphlet, but it is quite short. And that is definitely by design. And, privileging parsimony is more difficult than one might think. I mean, making it short is harder than making it longer. But but again, I did it on purpose, so that it'd be more accessible and hopefully more interesting to more and more readers. And so my analysis came through narratives. So I collected narratives and did interviews with my participants, and then I used their own words to create these short stories. So the short stories are technically fiction because they're composite stories. They're not one person's story, but most of the words in italics in the text are direct quotes from my participants as they tell their own lived experiences. It's called We Are Not Mahogany because that was one of the phrases used by one of my older participants, Ugandan male. All of my participants in my study were Ugandan men. And the phrase is meant to mean that we don't live very long. The mahogany tree lives longer than most of the trees here in this region in Africa. So when we say we are not mahogany, we mean, after all, we're not going to live that long anyway. And so therefore, let us make choices based on the moment or on the present rather than the long term, because we're not going to live that long anyway. Those were his words, not mine. I was just sharing them as a result of my research. So that's why I decided to call the book We Are Not Mahogany, because as we look at the decisions made by my participants and then try to overlap it onto other research about male decision making and the lived experiences of men in the region, that notion is pretty prevalent. You know, we talk in the States a lot about living in the moment, which there's a lot of beauty and special power to that. But if you only live in the moment, then there are other consequences as well. So I tried to honor their lived experiences, their stories, by using their words. So if you read the book, do realize that all the words, make sure you read the foreword, because it explains all this. Again, pretty briefly, but the words in italics are direct quotes from the participants that have been put together to create three composite characters: a young man, a middle-aged man, and then a senior, as they tell us their life, their lived experiences.
And I feel like when we read stories, you know, stories speak to us as humans. So when we read stories where the experience is not like our own, that gives us an opportunity, a peek into the window, so to speak, of how other people's experiences differ from ours. And I think that goes back to this idea of we have all this polarity. How can we create discourse? Well, the first thing is we have to be able to expand our view that not all experiences are our experience, and be able to have conversations around, well, what does that mean? And how can we each make life better for ourselves and the greater good, so to speak. But you can never come together on common ground if we can't even see each other's experience. So I feel like it's a really valuable book. Folks, we're going to have the link to where you can find this on Amazon in the YouTube description. So if you are intrigued now about We Are Not Mahogany, I encourage you to go pick up a copy of the book. Before we move on to another topic, what I'd like to do is ask the audience a question. So if you're listening or you're watching this video, pause, take a moment, and I want you to think about what is the difference that you want to make in the world, and share down below your passion or your cause in the comments, and tell us why it's important to you. And if you haven't stepped out, and it's in your heart, but you haven't stepped out, what is that one step that you can take today to lead you towards making that difference out in either in your life, your community, your world? What is that thing that you would like to be doing? I do read each comment and I will respond to you. So Nathaniel, while they're thinking about their thoughts, why don't you share one thing that people will not learn about you from your bios or social profiles?
Well, okay.
This is my trick. I always add this one in.
But let me just say this real quickly about that one step. I think that's such a profound and important comment, because I always said that, 22 years ago, 24 years ago, when I first came here and had that aha moment and felt that purpose, I had no idea how to get here. I had no idea how to do it. How is this even possible? Yeah, I want to go back to Uganda. I want to help these kids. How? And it was so overwhelming until I did exactly what you just asked your listeners to do, and that is take it down to the first step. What is the first step? I always said it's like crossing a river. Have you ever crossed a creek, where you use stepping stones to get across the creek? you usually don't see the whole path. You have to just find the first stepping stone. Then you stand on that. And then after you're on that first stepping stone, then you look for the second, then you look for the third, then you look for the fourth, then you have to swim a little bit, then you find another one, then you find, but then you do eventually cross the creek. So, but if you just look at the other side of the creek, you're gonna say, I can't get there. I can't get there. There's a creek between me and there. But if you look instead for that first step, that first stepping stone, whatever it is, once you land on that and take that step, then the second step reveals itself. So that's a very important question, and I'm glad that you asked it. Now, what will people not know about me? Unfortunately, with social media, I think everybody knows everything anymore. Let's see. I have too many dogs. I don't know.
Is that such a thing? I'm not
mm,
sure that's a thing, too many. If I could have that many
yeah.
dogs, I would probably do so.
Well, you know, I have 6 here, and then we have 3 at the Human Development Center, and then I'm about to move out to the village again to be near the Equator business to help support the team there. So we're gonna have at least 3 more there. So anyway, that's kind of adding up. But they're not just friends here, they're also, you know, a support team in every way.
Yes.
Emotional support, security support, all of that. Let's see, I've had malaria 9 times. I grew up on the Navajo Nation in the United States, but I think all that's out there. I don't know. I was in politics. Politics was where I thought I was going. My bachelor's degree is in Spanish and in political science. And now I live in Africa and do this. So, you know, there it is.
That's great. You know, it's always just interesting to tease out one thing or a number of things that, you know, people don't really think about when they start researching somebody or to look up what they're doing. And I try to get something out that shapes the person. So I like
Sure.
it. So by now, you folks, thank you so much for putting comments in. I really look forward to seeing what you might put in there. Before we close out, Nathaniel, is there something that you would like that I didn't ask you, or that you would love for people to know either about the mission or the book or whatever is on your mind?
Yes, thank you. This idea of an HIV-free generation, I think maybe some people don't understand what that means exactly. What I mean is that they're not a cure for HIV, but that people who are living with HIV can still continue to have partnerships, can produce children, can have long, healthy lives without HIV being a part of the next generation's story. And we believe that that comes from people who are self-empowered, who can make choices that they want to make, not the choices that are forced upon them, people who are informed, people who are strong. And so that's what we're about at the Leadership Institute, is to create and empower our teammates, our students, our interns, ourselves, to achieve our highest and best, whatever that might be. So we didn't start a boarding school or a vocational school where we're producing nurses or only doctors, but where people feel empowered to make their own choices and to explore their own purpose and to move forward on their own, even though they're getting support from a community like ours or a community like yours. So that's what we mean by an HIV-free generation. It's not a cure. We would love that too. And Dora, who's one of our senior interns, that's her goal. And you can see a video about her at our website, aliuganda.com. But it's not exactly what we mean by an HIV-free generation. So I kind of like to make that clear, because I think that's a phrase that we use all the time, but that may not be so familiar to others.
Okay, great. No, I think that's awesome. And I love that you mentioned Dora, because, you know, some of the children that you started with have been with you through the journey, and who are now have gone going to and gone through graduating from university. And Dora has done such a remarkable job to not only do that, but then she comes and shares and she ministers to people on her trips, and she's just a bright light. And so I do encourage you to watch Dora's video on the website. So I want to thank everyone for their time. Nathaniel, thank you for your time joining us today. I appreciate the people who have viewed or listened to the conversation between Nathaniel and I. Please subscribe to the channel so you know when the next awesome video is going to come out, and hit the feed, as well as hear information that will help you grow your leadership, live for today and not someday. We Are Not Mahogany is available on Amazon, and we will add that link into the description. A few ways that you'll be able to reach out and connect with Nathaniel will include the websites. Ali Uganda is one, AidChild.org is there, NathanielDunigan.com is out there, and we will include the social platform links that Nathaniel and the organization is active on, so that you will be able to see the Twitter handle and the Instagram, etc., so that you will be able to connect or follow in those ways. So with one more thank you, I just want to encourage you to go forth and do great things. Thank you so much.